Spin your passion into a business with Shopify and break sales records with the world's best converting checkout. Let's hear that one more time. The world's best converting checkout. Shopify's legendary checkout makes it easier for customers to shop on your website, across social media, and everywhere in between. Now that's music to your ears. Any way you spin it, you can be a smash hit with Shopify. Start your $1 a month trial today at shopify.com/records.
Attention podcast listener, we've got an exciting new podcast coming just for patrons of patreon.com/TalkingSimpsons.
Talking Futurama Season 2 Part 1 has begun exclusively for our $5 and up patrons on the Talking Simpsons Network. That's the first 10 episodes of Futurama coming to you once a week.
So just sign up for $5 a month at patreon.com/TalkingSimpsons and you'll get Talking Futurama Season 2 and all of our limited miniseries, including the entirety of Talking Futurama Season 1. That's 13 episodes.
That is patreon.com/Talking Simpsons. Now please enjoy the rest of this podcast.
Cartoons from present in the past. Every week will be an animated bash. What a cartoon! What a cartoon! Maybe a short but mostly shows. We'll talk, we'll analyze, exploring as we go. What a cartoon! What a cartoon! What a cartoon! What a cartoon!
Hello, everybody, and welcome to What a Cartoon, where our hearts beat in hyperdrive. I'm your host, the master of faster, Bob Mackey, and this is an audio exploration of every cartoon ever. Who is here with me today?
It's Henry Gilbert, and I didn't know you had a tuner card, Bob.
Oh, it's my surprise. And who is our special guest?
Oh, that's me, LittleKuriboh, and I can hear you breathing and I can see you coming.
Oh no, edit that out. And today's episode is the Yu-Gi-Oh! 5D's episode. On your mark, get set, duel.
I'm coming for you, Jack. And this time, I'm gonna settle the score.
And today's episode is a very special patron request from one of our $50 patrons, Henry.
Yes, yeah, this is from Shy Ranger, who picked this one, who is also very excited about our special guest today. Let me read why Shy Ranger chose us to do Yu-Gi-Oh! 5D's. Quote, I chose this because it's my favorite incarnation of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Series. Most people overlook this series and mock it because of the motorcycles. I admit, not unfairly, but people who stick with it find it's the most mature Yu-Gi-Oh! Series. It is a dystopian story with focuses on classism, corrupt officials, cults, and conspiracy theories. Basically, this feels like the creators wanted to make the most of the fact that this was a long-running series and use the opportunity to make a big, unique push. So, yes, thanks for picking this one. And, man, if there was only 4 words that could break down what the plot of this show is.
Something on motorcycles, I assume.
Yes, yeah. Card games on motorcycles
There we go.
is what I'm referring to.
We struck gold.
I honestly thought I'd escaped that.
We're very sorry.
But yes, thank you, Martin, for coming on the show today.
Absolutely. And shout out to Shy Ranger for requesting the episode, because I'm very excited to talk about this, because I don't get to talk about the other Yu-Gi-Oh! Shows that much. I'm often asked about, the original, the Duel Monsters with Yami Yugi and Kaiba and all that, but it's nice to jump in with Yusei and company and see what they're up to.
Yeah, there are 20 more years of Yu-Gi-Oh! Outside of the original series, so
oh my gosh.
Just so much to talk about.
I had the most uncanny feeling while watching this episode, because I remembered being there at San Diego Comic-Con where they premiered it, the dub of it, and that was 10 years ago, and it's just there's been 3 spin-offs since, I think.
Yeah, with a 7th coming very soon.
Oh my gosh, I just don't know how it keeps happening, but I mean, I'm very happy that it does.
Well, yeah, I guess for our listeners not in the Yu-Gi-Oh! Fan community, tell them a little bit about yourself and the LittleKuriboh series of Yu-Gi-Oh! Abridged.
Oh, yeah. Well, I started off making content on YouTube in around 2006 where I really didn't have a specific idea in mind with what I was going to do. I just knew I was really into Yu-Gi-Oh at the time. I'd kind of gotten into it late, right when the series had finished airing and they'd started showing Yu-Gi-Oh GX on TV, and I jumped into it really late. But I got really hardcore into Yu-Gi-Oh. And I wanted to express my fandom, my love for the show. And I made a couple of videos where it was audio from different sources played over Yu-Gi-Oh footage, the kind of thing, you've seen that sort of thing a lot. Then after about 3 or 4 of those, I sat down and I was like, how can I express why I love this show and help other people maybe appreciate that there's more to it than the card game, the dueling and the holograms and everything. And those are still very cool and they're a very integral part of the show. But I've always loved it for the characters and the story. And I really wanted to emphasize that. And I think the idea I had was just to summarize, at the very least, the first episode. I don't think I ever had any intention of going further than episode 1. I just wrote a script in the space of, I want to say, an hour or 2. And I recorded the audio in about as much time. And you can really tell. And I put episode 1 of Yu-Gi-Oh! Abridged, which is literally just the first episode of Yu-Gi-Oh! Condensed into 5 minutes, and hopefully it's somewhat satirical and funny. But more than anything, it's just meant to be an abbreviation of the show and what I like about it, and even what I like about the dumbest aspects of it, because I enjoy the fact that it's kind of a ridiculous show, and I really wanted that to be sort of front and center. So I made this parody of Yu-Gi-Oh! Called the Abridged series, and even though it said Abridged series, I didn't know if I was going to continue from episode 1, but the response to the first episode was surprisingly positive, and there are a lot of people who were like, you got to keep going. And so I was like, you know what? Okay. And here we are, and I'm still doing it.
And I will say to our listeners, I don't think you need to be a fan or even aware of the original series to enjoy Abridged. It's just a fun summation of a ridiculous anime series.
That's my hope, yeah.
Rewatching some of your classic ones.
Oh, me too.
And my husband, he grew up as a Yu-Gi-Oh fan. He's a couple years younger than me, so he was paying attention to Yu-Gi-Oh while Yu-Gi-Oh first came out when Bob and I both entered college, and so we weren't paying as much attention to it as we had Pokemon a couple years before.
Yeah.
So watching it with my husband, he could explain some of the deeper references to this is what Exodia does, or this is why he's joking about this flagrant ignoring of the rules of Yu-Gi-Oh that Kaiba constantly is doing.
Everybody does. Everybody ignores those rules.
And you've been doing it for so long that there's an entire abridged anime community on YouTube that's appeared over the 14 years since you first made that video. It's pretty amazing.
It's so humbling. I will never get over it. Any of the going to conventions, getting to do panels, that's fun. But the stuff that really means the world to me is getting to see other people do this sort of thing with different animes that they love. I really appreciate that people were able to step up to the plate, because I kept getting requests to do different animes, and I was like, I've never seen this show. I have no idea what you're talking about. So it was really, in a way, it was a relief that everybody else jumped on board and was like, I'm going to do One Piece. I'm going to do Yu-Gi-Oh! GX. And I was like, yeah, good. I could never do it.
I was watching your videos again last night. I watched a bunch of them over Christmas or Thanksgiving very recently, but I was watching them last night. It brought me back to a time when YouTube was a much different place and much more heartwarming than it is today. It was not like a celebrity maker. It was I'm just going to do weird videos online and see what happens.
It was the Wild West in a really fun kind of way. Anything went. And, obviously there was still hiccups and there were still problems that you had to overcome. There was still nobody you could really talk to as far as, customer service goes. But everybody was on board with this, with what was going on. And it felt like a really, really thriving, fun community that, everybody was doing something completely different. And I hate to say it, sometimes I look at YouTube now and I'm like, everything feels the same sometimes, just because everybody has to fit that niche, that safe niche that YouTube will allow to sort of propagate on there. And I hate to, obviously criticize YouTube, given that it is responsible for a lot of the attention and that I've received over the years. But it is a shame to see it go from something where creativity was encouraged, and it was really cool to see just really wild and out there things. And now it's like, I guess I could go on there if I wanted to see somebody open a box.
Yeah. Well, and also, speaking of how like Wild West it was, it feels like it was before, the production companies of anime recognized that their footage was being uploaded out to the internet outside of Japan and shut down. Like it's from a different time in that regard too.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, when did it hit you that your gags from Abridged had so like fully enriched the Yu-Gi-Oh community with people saying like, screw the rules, I've got money and things like that?
Right. No, I mean, I guess it hit me when I saw like a thread on the Penny Arcade forums that was like 20 pages long, and it was about the Yu-Gi-Oh! Abridged. And one of the first responses was, "This is either the greatest thing ever or the dumbest thing ever." And I was like, I'll take it. Yeah, I'm very proud of that. I would be very proud to have created the greatest, dumbest thing. So that was the first time I really noticed things taking off. When I really understood how far traveled things were was when I saw like the voice actors from the show saying lines that people had like waited in line to request. And I feel really bad in retrospect that they asked to say a lot of these lines that they had no idea what the context was. But at the same time, they're humoring people and it's all in fun. And it just made me realize, oh, wow, I'm hearing the characters say these lines from like the dub, and it's weird and it's exciting. And how did I get here?
You gave people a lot of great voicemail outgoing messages.
Very happy about that.
Did doing these voices yourself in these videos, like, did it give you more appreciation for, the role of dub voice actors, or even, pushing you professionally into the voice acting career?
Oh my goodness, that's a great question. It definitely gave me more appreciation because I had no real knowledge of it leading into making Yu-Gi-Oh! Abridged. I've never really been a huge anime fan. I had watched, I think, half a dozen anime shows and movies before I watched like Yu-Gi-Oh! So I didn't really know about how the dub industry worked, but getting to sit down and record everything myself and realizing that even for like a 5-minute video, this is an enormous task that requires a lot of patience, a lot of stamina, and a lot of ultimately mic skill that, I don't necessarily think I have. But it's been really interesting learning upwards in a way, because I started really rough. That first episode, it sounds like I recorded it on a pigeon. And I didn't know what I was doing. And I remember getting to like episode 25 and going back and watching an early episode and thinking something's gone wrong, because I sound like I'm speaking at like 0.5 speed. I sound like I'm speaking into some sort of filter. And I realized that I had just gotten more natural and more comfortable with the performance aspect of things and working with a microphone. I think more than anything, doing the Abridged series gave me the time I needed to get comfortable in front of a microphone, because I'd never considered it as a job. I'd never considered it as something I was going to even be doing for a long period of time. But I do like doing voices, and it just became a very natural fit for me to do this sort of thing, and for this to be a skill that I ended up exercising. And I know it's not the traditional way into the dub industry or into voice acting, period. But I am grateful for the steps that I took, and I'm grateful for the support that I had from everybody around me, friends, family, and fans alike, to make it into some official dub work, and even outside of that, like video games. And the most notable thing that I've recorded professionally is I do the audio description for the visually impaired for the new Star Wars movies.
Oh yeah,
oh great.
And it's very exciting for me, because I do love Star Wars, but it's an entirely different aspect of recording that I just never would have considered if I didn't have the time and the confidence that I'd gained from doing abridging for so long.
I guess the last question I asked before we get into the history of the show is like, what has been your journey with the show 5D's? Because when it first appeared, it was ridiculed a little in the Yu-Gi-Oh community, I think.
I can see why.
Yeah.
I've always felt really bad about the card games on motorcycles joke. I mean, I say always. I eventually felt really bad about the card games on motorcycles joke, because I realized that had kind of superseded any real conversation that anyone could have about it. If you were talking to somebody who had little interest in it or could have interest in the show and eventually watch it, but they just knew of it as the Card Games on Motorcycles show. Ultimately, I don't think D-Wheels, the dual runners, whatever they call them, I don't think that stuff is that far-fetched compared to, say, a giant hologram on a dual field, which is probably hugely expensive, and these giant arena duels where you're watching kids playing card games. Like I'm not meaning to scoff, but it is absurd to me.
I agree. Like, I don't see how this crossed the line, you know?
Right. All it did was make it a little bit faster, you know?
But I can see if you're a longtime viewer of Yu-Gi-Oh! And then you hear, like, well, what's the next show? Well, they play card games while driving motorcycles. Oh, that sounds dumb. Like, just as a singular description, I could see that kind of reaction.
Absolutely. And I feel like, unfortunately, Yu-Gi-Oh! Is always kind of shortchanged by the gimmick of the series. Like each different spin-off has its own gimmick, it would seem, and it's less noticeable in like something like GX, whereas in something like Arc 5 with the pendulum summoning, they're throwing pendulum imagery at you every other scene. But with 5Ds, yeah, I do feel like it got enormously shortchanged by the people reacting to the motorcycle aspect of things, just because it does have a very mature story. I do often say I think it's the best Yu-Gi-Oh! Show that I've personally seen, just because it had me hooked. I love these characters. I think it's a very strong main cast. I think Yusei is a strong protagonist. He's a good sort of alternative to someone like a Jaden or even a Yugi. He's very quiet and very sure of himself and confident. And I do like that it's kind of a cyberpunky, post-apocalyptic almost setting. It's doing a lot of things that you just don't expect from Yu-Gi-Oh! But because it has that card game aspect with a motorcycle twist, a lot of people don't want to give it the time of day. And it's one of those things that you'd have to just sort of muscle past the reflex to be like, oh no, this is stupid. And then you find that it actually does have a very interesting and compelling and at times very emotional story.
I think the people who dislike this version are kind of short-sighted, because ultimately you're going to be watching characters play a card game while explaining the rules. Like, don't you want the context around that to be as exciting as possible? It's just like, that's the most exciting way to play a card game on a motorcycle.
And the motorcycle move fast instead of characters standing around
on podiums or whatever.
Well, and I mean, and also talking about like what looks sillier, I think having your motorcycle be basically your tabletop to put cards upon is less silly than having like a big arm wing
power
that
glove
you put your thing on. Like that looks sillier, honestly.
They should have split the difference and just had people running instead of riding motorcycles.
They'd have to have amazing aerobic power to run while having to exposition as much as every character has to in a Yu-Gi-Oh! Fight.
They're anime teenagers. They have the strength.
They have giant lungs. Their lung power
Exactly.
well, yeah, like my personal history with the show is incredibly light. I didn't, until we did the research for our regular Yu-Gi-Oh! Episode, I had not looked into the existence of any of the spin-offs beyond original Yu-Gi-Oh! So I didn't know about 5Ds or Vrains or Arms V, any of those. So.
I think I explained it on the first episode, but yeah, like I was only aware of the first series because we were selling the cards at the game store I worked at. And then I just assumed, no more Yu-Gi-Oh! Was a fad. And then doing the research, finding out it never stopped, I looked into the mirror, I saw a skeleton staring back at me. I'm like, no, old man, there's 20 years of this.
Yeah, this show is like over a decade old now. It's crazy how
this
long
is like
it's been around.
Obama era America, just like the early years of that term.
And but now that I've watched it, I watched the first 5 episodes for this, and we all understand this is a commercial for cards.
Oh yeah, and what a commercial!
But knowing that, I do feel like artistically it is interesting, and I really do love anything cyberpunk. Like when Akira is a long shadow over this show for sure. Yeah. And but I think if they're going to rip off something, ripping off Akira is a good place to start.
Yeah, just look at The Matrix.
Yeah. Oh, man. You should listen to our Animatrix podcast. We have a lot of thoughts.
Do you have 4.5 free hours?
Yeah. Well, why don't we talk about the history of 5Ds? I'm not going to explain the whole background of Yu-Gi-Oh! We did that on our previous Yu-Gi-Oh! One, but so let's fast forward to 2008 in Japan, I believe it was. This show premiered 1 week after Yu-Gi-Oh! GX ended, which that was the show that followed Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters, the original show, which both of those ran for like over 150 episodes. I forget the exact count, but there was apparently talk behind the scenes of like Kazuki Takahashi, the creator of Yu-Gi-Oh! He didn't really want to do a third series, or he wasn't going to give his blessing to it, but they talked him into it. And
a dump truck full of money pulled up to his house.
Though he said that like this would be the last one, is how he thought of it at the time. Like he's like, all right, this but no more, which obviously was not the case. But I think too they had the goal of making this, appeal to their aging demographic of Yu-Gi-Oh fans. Like by 2008, if you were 8 when you played Duel Monsters in 2000, you're 16 in 2008. So it's time to that's why I think the protagonist is much older and cooler than Yugi Muto is.
So are the new shows made for the children of the people who watched the first show?
I think so now, yeah. The newest, it makes me think of the newest Pokemon series, which is, they finished the Sun and Moon stuff, and so the new Pokemon series is just going everywhere and meeting all the old characters, and it's full of references. Like they're seeing that the parents are now their old viewers, and maybe Yu-Gi-Oh! Sevens is going to do that, recognize the same thing.
I keep forgetting it's called that, and I was like, what, did you make that up? Oh, no, that's real.
It's premiering in April. We'll keep an eye out for that.
Very excited.
But yeah, so Takahashi, not only improved it, but also was involved in the design of, I think, maybe more than Yusei, but he was involved in the design of Yusei. He said that with the other two leads, he wanted he said it was like rock, paper, scissors, and that Yusei filled out the third archetype of those three. And it also, there would be a comic version of it, but it's done by someone else. Like, once the original Yu-Gi-Oh! Comic ended, Takahashi pretty much was done with the grind of weekly comic books.
I don't blame him.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, once you sell $1 billion card game, maybe it's time to stop with the weekly deadline.
Yeah, manga authors work so hard, have to put out so much content so often. It's nuts.
Basically the opposite of an abridger.
It's an expander. And yeah, so, I mean, obviously it's easy to mock the card games on motorcycles thing, but, after more than 300 episodes of mostly duels of characters standing in place and shouting at each other as they deal cards, I think it was a clever idea to shake things up by having the things always be in motion and make it about speed. And even I believe what the rule is, you can't use spell cards, you can only use speed cards in the duels.
Right. In Speed World.
In the very speedy world. And yeah, I mean, if they're going to base it around all the speed, then just fully take on the Akira cyberpunk style of the haves and the have-nots and classes, and the stratification of classes, and even cyberpunk anti-authoritarianism in there too, which I'm honestly, I guess, it wasn't 4Kids takes what Konami hands them back then, but it definitely doesn't feel like the kind of thing you would sell in America and in America. sorry.
It's all good.
But
it happens.
But it doesn't seem like the type of thing that an American production would make. I think it for kids anyway, because it is kind of very questioning authority, and it's talking about you'll never leave this place. You're a scum. You're yeah. I like that it deals with that. And from a gameplay perspective, it really brings in the new thing was synchro summoning, which was introduced with that. I mean the character does it. Yusei does it in this episode, but I guess that was the big new gimmick, right?
Yes, they had just introduced synchro summoning with the introduction of 5D's as an anime that was their way of promoting it, I believe.
And I also, Martin, how much do you play of the card game, or how familiar with that are you?
Almost nothing. I think I've played less than 10 times in my life. I honestly could count it on my fingers, and I think I've won 3 duels. It's not a good track record. I wouldn't be going to Duelist Kingdom anytime soon, unfortunately.
Yeah, while watching this, so I know this is an advertisement for their new card expansion set or whatever they're doing in Japan at this time. And I was wondering, the people watching this, they have to already know the rules of basic Yu-Gi-Oh! So is this just like a different interpretation of basic Yu-Gi-Oh? Because it seemed like there were so many things that were not explained because the audience is like, oh yeah, I know all the basic rules. I know what a graveyard is. I know what recycling cards is. I know what how to end a turn, like things like that are not told to the audience.
Yeah, they definitely assumed that the audience was already familiar with it from the previous shows. And I can say from experience, because when I went to the San Diego Comic-Con when they were promoting the dub and the synchro summoning, I went to the booth where they were demoing the new rules. And I sat down and I had to explain to them that I had never played this game before. And the guy there demoing it knew who I was, and he kind of laughed to himself when I said that. But I had to have him explain attack mode, defense mode, all the basics. So they definitely, I think, were under the impression that people, unlike me, had gotten to grips with things.
And in Japan, it originally started airing April 2008 to March 2011. Also, like, I couldn't find like a full confirmation of this, but the prevailing wisdom is that the series was planned to end in episode 64. That is the finale of the Dark Signers arc, which is pretty much everything they've been setting up from episode 1 forward. And I believe the consensus in the community is the show kind of stumbled a little bit after Dark Signers to find its footing again. As it was continuing, but I don't know. Maybe there's some Yu-Gi-Oh fans that like season 3. I'm not sure.
I'm sure there are. All I know is those first 2 seasons are definitely the strongest part of 5D's, in my opinion. And it would make sense to end the show there, but I would feel like it would be remiss to waste those characters with just 64 episodes. Like the original Yu-Gi-Oh had like over 200 and GX gets over 100. 5Ds deserved a decent run, I think.
Maybe they were just modest in their planning of like, it probably won't be popular enough to continue as long as GX did. Like maybe they thought the fad was dying down and then they were surprised to see like, oh, this is actually really popular. Okay, keep it going.
Yeah, that wouldn't surprise me. And I feel like sometimes it's worked in reverse where they've had plans and they realize, oh, this isn't working out. We just have to shoot this thing in the foot and leave it to die, and then we'll move on to the next spin-off.
And I watched like 2 different timeline videos, and I still don't really understand where this fits in the Yu-Gi-Oh timeline. It is technically in the same timeline as Yu-Gi-Oh and GX. Those are easier to connect, as from what I've seen, but 5D's is like it is forward in the timeline, but it's also complicated by like they just in the dub they make up some characters that are from the original show being in there, which I mean there's Jeremy Wheeler is the most famous example.
That muddies the waters a bit.
Yes, yeah. I mean, have you the Jeremy Wheeler thing? Have you seen that before? I'm assuming, Martin.
Are you talking about Jesse Wheeler?
Sorry, Jesse. Wheeler. Yeah, Jesse Wheeler. That's right. There's just a guy who they drew to look like Joey Wheeler, and then the dub actors are just like, oh, that's Jesse Wheeler, his cousin.
His cousin, yeah. It's kind of absurd, but I mean, at least they did something with it. I guess it's kind of cute, but they don't think about the ripples in the canon that it creates.
It's true.
The only thing that makes it officially, so clearly officially in the same universe, other than the character in this one, Trudge / Ushio, the only other one is that Yusei appears in the crossover movie Bonds Beyond Time, which means they are all in the same timeline because he time travels back to meet with them.
And he has a magazine which talks about Yugi winning some tournament with Pegasus. So he's definitely aware of those events having happened in his history. He's just never talked about them or acknowledged them in the entire series.
And it's funny to think too in the future from, Yugi Muto's normal-ish existence that somehow there becomes like a post-apocalypse and a stratified society like there is in this show.
It's crazy. It's really out there. I like that they did that though, because it there's only so many times I can watch kids go to school. You know?
Yeah, when we did the first episode, I was like, I have no questions about this world. It seems very straightforward. This one, it puts a lot of like mysteries in from the very beginning, like what are satellite people, what are city people, what's happening here, what happened between Jack and Yusei. Yeah,
Yeah, they layer in a lot of mysteries, like the momentum drive thing in the second episode. Like, they don't even really tell you about it. They just they spend more time explaining the synchro summoning than they do the world, which is it's very Yu-Gi-Oh.
And the show starts off with a kind of like classic Yu-Gi-Oh rivalry between Yusei Fudo and Jack Atlas, who he's basically Seto Kaiba. Like, his face is very Kaiba-y. And I really like that they are about like swapped positions in society, and that spoilers for later in the show, but it is revealed that Yusei is actually from the higher class and Jack is from the lower class, but now Jack lives in luxury in Neo Domino while Yusei is satellite scum.
I think they might have even hinted at that this early in the show.
Yeah,
like very vaguely.
There's definitely more hints at their connection in the dub, I think. I remember in the Japanese, people were like, it's much more vague and not even acknowledged, whereas in the dub, it's like, Jack, I'm going to get you for what you did, and all that.
Yeah, I think, for kids, they get some negativity thrown their way for choices they make in dubbing, but in some of the changes I noted in this episode, I watched the sub and the dub today, and some of the changes they made, I think, were good for at least, like, clarity in a children's show, like, kids need things explained more to them than just like, oh, the way Yusei grumbled there implies that he has a long history with Jack and that he wants to get revenge,
Yusei is like a mute in the Japanese version sometimes. In some episodes, he really doesn't have much dialogue. And I enjoy that about him. That's one of the things I really enjoy about him as a protagonist, is that he is kind of an introvert compared to everybody else that we see. It presented a big challenge for the dub, I think, because it's hard for children to like that kind of character, I think. So they had to really make him a bit more chatty.
And as the series goes on, there's like, ancient prophecies and cults and, oppressive hyper-fascist prisons that tattoo you with marks that will follow you the rest of your life.
We hear about the facility in this one and the re-education center too.
And also like powerful birthmarks and the summoning of 5 or sometimes 6 very special dragons, including Yusei's Stardust Dragon, which that's his like marquee character. I guess that's his, blue eyes white. Yeah, it's Dark Magician. Yeah. The dub, as usual, does soften things too. Like some of the more dystopian elements of like really hitting on like, you satellite garbage, you're not allowed here. Like they pull back that a little, as do they some of the like prison torture. There's a little less of that. And of course, the classic 4Kids finger guns. You get a lot of those.
Oh, still this much later. Wow.
They just really love giving finger guns to each other. I don't see the problem.
Except people cower in fear of those finger guns. Like, no, please.
It's social networking is very different in that world.
and yes, tons of mentions of like Seto. They're like, oh, I'd love to meet Seto Kaiba, but he's dead. They say things like that are just not at all hinted in the Japanese version of it.
Seto Kaiba's dead, but Jesse Wheeler's just walking around like nothing's wrong.
There is also a very complicated thing that messed up their conspiracy cult storylines that they were building, because one of the voice actors was revealed to be a member of a kind of like cult / BDSM collective that is honestly too complicated to explain here. You can Google Romo Sophie if you want to learn more about that thing.
One of the characters in the show?
One of the actresses.
The actors, okay.
It was big scandal that she was a member of this cult apparently. And so they're like, well, shit, this is we have to really tone down the cult stuff we were planning to do because of the similarities to real life. Had you heard of this before?
Never. I can't believe they had to tone things down in a Yu-Gi-Oh show because it was too similar to real events.
It was shocking to find out. Yeah,
Wow.
It changed up a bit of the stories they were going to tell in the Dark Signers arc, I believe. And then, of course, another issue with this series, which did premiere in the U.S. on Cartoon Network. But another thing that did affect this was that the 4Kids bankruptcy happened during it.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It came up, I detailed this a bit in our Yu-Gi-Oh! One, but in 2011, late 2010, they were getting... it was the beginning of them being sued by TV Tokyo, the broadcaster / co-owner of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Anime series, and also the Pokemon series, saying that 4Kids had withheld earnings from them and that they were keeping money from them. And so 4Kids, it's 2011, they're not doing as hot as they used to. The 2000s, that was 4Kids decade. Like, they freaking owned cartoons then.
They owned the Fox network, at least the kids portion.
Yeah.
4Kids for everyone.
But so this really effed up 4Kids plans, the TV Tokyo lawsuit that they were still trying to deal with and pay them off, and that of course also halted production on Yu-Gi-Oh! 5D's, because how can they keep dubbing and putting out and localizing the show while they're being sued by the producer of the show? So the show stops, and the final, I believe it's the last 31 episodes go undubbed and unreleased. Ultimately, from the 4Kids lawsuit, they will go bankrupt, sell off all their properties. Saban buys everything that isn't Yu-Gi-Oh! And Konami buys Yu-Gi-Oh! And eventually 5Ds will get every episode released, but only in subtitled form. I do not believe they finished dubbing it.
To date, still not dubbed. Wow. Oh, we should mention up front that this is just on YouTube legally by Yu-Gi-Oh! Company, Yu-Gi-Oh! Account or whatever.
Yeah, the, Konami's, since they bought the 4Kids localization company and just used it to continue releasing Yu-Gi-Oh! They have made it very available. It's impressive how connected they are with the realities of streaming these days and how to make things available like that.
It's really cool, honestly. As a fan who has access to so much Yu-Gi-Oh! Content as a result, it's just really exciting. I know the one thing that people still complain about, though, is that they haven't really released the fully uncut dub of Yu-Gi-Oh! Which is it's a pipe dream. It's never going to happen.
Hey, be happy they released official uncut subs of it.
Yes.
Pokemon fans will never get to see that.
That's true, yeah.
And, so on the production side of this series, it was Gallop once again. They're the animation studio that's done every Yu-Gi-Oh! Series, overseen and broadcast by TV Tokyo, and Shueisha is still involved in it too, like all Yu-Gi-Oh! The series director was Katsumi Ono. He has worked on the series from the beginning. He boarded the first series and has been series director on this and Arms V. And I was also unit director on Bonds Beyond Time movie. So not full director on that, but he's a high level guy in the Yu-Gi-Oh! Machinery. Ono also was series director on a recent anime series I loved, Isekai Izakaya.
Oh yeah, you talked that up a lot when it was new.
I never shut up about that show. Have you seen the show, Martin?
No, I'm excited to hear about it, though.
Oh man, it's awesome. So not unlike how Yu-Gi-Oh! Is an advertisement, Izakaya is, which means an izakaya from another world. It is basically a tourist commercial for Japan for 2020, but it is a classic style izakaya, Japanese pub kind of food, but this pub exists in another universe that's basically like Game of Thrones style universe, and so these European, basically Germanic Middle Ages folks, they go to an izakaya and they're like, oh my god, chicken karage, this is delicious sushi, what? So it's just really an anime about how good Japanese food is, and then it teaches you how to make it. It's a fun, silly show that I heartily endorse.
So it's like Food Wars, but I'm not going to feel deep shame watching it.
Yes, no,
It's not horny.
No,
Okay.
I mean, there are scenes of folks going like, "Oh my god, this food's so good,"
Right.
But there's not like a nude silhouette of them appreciating the food.
Gotcha. I'm just excited that I got to reference a different anime that I knew to talk about one that I didn't know, because that doesn't happen very often.
Also, according to the fan wiki of the show, Ono's Twitter is pretty useful in answering questions about the shows he works on. Like, at least Japanese fans ask him like, "Hey, when did this happen?" or "What happened to this character?" and he'll answer them. So he's kind of his tweets are a source on a number of wiki pages. And the series had two head writers. The head writer of the first 26 episodes is Atsuhiro Tomioka, and this episode he's the sole credited writer on as well. This is his only Yu-Gi-Oh work he did, actually, but he has like hundreds of script credits on countless shonen shows, like both live action and animated. Like, his name is on too many Pokemon scripts to count. Like, if you go to just his page on Bulbapedia, it's like scripts written by him. It's like over 100. He's written that many Pokemon episodes. I can understand why he got hired on to this. And he also wrote for the Ace Attorney adaptation as well, if you watch that anime. And after, though, the first 26 episodes, he left, and when they started up season 2, the head writer for all remaining episodes of 5D's was Shin Yoshida, who he's had this series writer position on basically every Yu-Gi-Oh series past the first one. Like, he's a Yu-Gi-Oh lifer, Yoshida is. Though he also wrote an episode on previous What a Cartoon podcast subject, Big O. He worked on that show. And he's the head writer of Izakaya as well.
Oh, so the director and writer of this teaming up.
Yeah. It sounds like it was just like a side job for the Yu-Gi-Oh team to, like, I wouldn't be surprised if the Japanese government was just like, could you guys make this commercial for tourism? If you like the pacing and storytelling of a Yu-Gi-Oh anime, but replace cards with Japanese food, then that's the show for you.
I'm down.
Character designer of it was Shuji Murayama. He was animation director on a lot of Yu-Gi-Oh, but this is the only show he was character designer on. Not many other high-level positions, honestly, after this show, but most of his credits I found were for key animation, which is an important role on any show, and he worked on a number of series as diverse as Gundam, Lupin, and Macross.
Cool.
Like, he's worked on a lot of stuff. And stateside, the localization was the last one handled officially by 4Kids Entertainment before, I mean, it's still like 4K Media, or I think now it's just been renamed like Konami New York or whatever is the name of the studio. But 4Kids Entertainment, this is the final one they did, and a lot of their usual folks working on it who worked on all the previous ones.
Yeah, I know I heard Eric Stewart somewhere in the mix playing one of the junk buddies.
Yes, yeah, he's in there. Of the two leads in it, Yusei is voiced by Gregory Abbey, though I think he has a different non-union name in the credits for the show. But Gregory Abbey's his name. He had previously voiced Tristan on Yu-Gi-Oh, not the original Tristan. That's a compliment to LittleKuriboh. I love all of the Tristan's voice. I think is consistently what makes me laugh the most.
Yeah,
it consistently makes me laugh a little bit as well. He's one of those things about the show that's always gonna there's always gonna be something there for me as well. Like, he's a treat to write.
I think the one that echoes in my mind the most of his lines that you did was he's like, "No one must know my secret."
Do you think that they did a 21 invisible gun salute when 4Kids went under?
21 finger salute.
Yeah. Well, and also Gregory Abbey, I think, is other than Tristan and Yusei, I think his most famous voice acting role is he played Raphael in the non-union years of TMNT that 4Kids did. Like, basically a decade of Ninja Turtles shows before Nickelodeon bought them were by 4Kids or Saban, one of those two. And so...
was that the CGI ones?
Not just CGI, but also there were 2D animated ones, too, that 4Kids did as well.
Okay, for Fox, right?
Yes. Yeah. And those TMNT shows like Rob Paulsen, the original Raphael, and the third Donatello, well, who's counting? But he was very clear of like, I didn't work on those shows because they were non-union. They didn't want to pay our union wages. So
you got to pay up for Rob Paulsen, buddy. He was Yakko Warner.
That was also why it was kind of lame when they did the 4Kids did a TMNT episode that was like the old turtles meet the new turtles, but they couldn't get any of the old voices because they refused to do it on a non-union show.
Just pay them once. I guess it's the principle.
It sets a dangerous precedent if they do it once for Rob Paulsen. What are they going to do for everybody else?
We did get Dan Green as Leonardo.
I love the 4Kids voice. I should say all this dumping on non-union voice acting. This is not an attack on the actors. I love the actors, and they are doing great at it. The
stuff is good. Yeah, I like it. I enjoyed it.
I wish
this podcast isn't about attacking actors. What did I sign up for?
Well, and speaking of voice actors too, Ted Lewis, he is Jack Atlas. He was Bakura in Duel Monsters. Also in Kirby Right Back at Ya, he was King Dedede.
Oh, wow.
And he's had one of the longest tenures on Pokemon. He's one of the 4Kids originals who then got brought back on Pokemon to resume his character of Giovanni. He's the American voice of Giovanni. Also of Tracy and the announcer. Those were his most regular roles on the Pokemon series, at least in the 4Kids.
Everybody loves Tracy.
But yeah, so that's all the background on the making of the show. Once it ended in 2011, it was followed very quickly by the next Yu-Gi-Oh series, which was like just a clean cut in timeline from it. But and yeah, you say I don't. Other characters from this have appeared in later Yu-Gi-Oh shows, but other than Yu-Gi-Oh doesn't have a ton of movies like Pokemon does. It really only had like 3-ish, and the most
some of them don't really count as well.
Yeah, the most recent one was just a straight up just Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters celebration. So Yusei was not invited to the party there, but yeah, I guess why don't we take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll go deep into this episode of Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds.
We're going deep.
真実はいつだって一つだから心の声を感じて勇気ない気持ちを掲げて明日への兆しをつかめ
Build stronger monsters faster with Yu-Gi-Oh! 5D's. Now you can find a secret rare Synchro Monster and 5 booster packs in every new Yu-Gi-Oh! tin, each sold separately. Unite to duel.
Prepare yourself for an epic journey as duel monsters travel through all 5 dimensions.
Yu-Gi-Oh! 5D's.
Bodies in motion. Infinite danger. Can you go the distance? The time is now to enter the 5th dimension.
Yu-Gi-Oh! 5D's.
All new next Saturday morning at 10:30 on the CW for Kids.
The CW for Kids. Sign on.
Welcome to the break, everybody. It's Henry Gilbert saying, let's rev it up, huh?
And this is Bob Mackey reminding you to check your blind spot before you play a card.
And a big thank you to our guest, LittleKuriboh. Martin is so cool, so nice and giving with his time for being such a Yu-Gi-Oh legend that he is, and we really appreciate it. You guys, if you've never checked out his videos, check them out, and his Patreon too for LittleKuriboh.
Mm-hmm.
But speaking of Patreons, that's how we're supported.
That's right. If you want to support our show and get so many bonus podcasts for your buck, please head on over to patreon.com/TalkingSimpsons. And if you sign up at the $5 level, you'll get access to everything behind that paywall. That is over 2.5 years worth of podcasts we've been doing since we started the Patreon in 2017. That includes all of our limited miniseries, including Talking Critic, Talking Futurama, Talk King of the Hill, and 2 new exclusive miniseries coming at you in 2020. We also have so many other bonuses on the Patreon, including interviews, end of season wrap-ups, deleted scene specials, and so much more. I dare say there were over 100 bonus podcasts waiting for you that you have never heard if you're not a part of our Patreon at patreon.com/TalkingSimpsons. And Henry will tell everyone out there what is happening at the $10 level. 1 extra long podcast every month for $10 patrons, and they're often over 4 hours long.
That's right. If you're a What a Cartoon fan, you probably heard last week's podcast, which was 55 minutes of Animatrix talk. Would you believe that the regular version of that is 4 hours and 25 minutes long? That's because it's our What a Cartoon movie, where each month we do an elongated episode of What a Cartoon about a different animated feature film. We've been doing the What a Cartoon movie side project for $10 and up patrons for over a year now. There are 14 different animated film podcasts that in total are probably like 50 hours at this point of exclusive things. So if you sign up now, you can hear The Animatrix, you can hear Toy Story, Iron Giant, Batman Mask of the Phantasm, Kiki's Delivery Service. Very pertinent to this episode, you can hear our Akira one. Boy, we go deep into Akira. A Goofy Movie, The Secret of Nim, Aladdin, Tiny Toons, How I Spent My Vacation, Rocco's Modern Life, Static Cling, Cowboy Bebop the movie, and I think I said Toy Story already, but just in case I didn't, Toy Story, Nightmare Before Christmas, that too.
And Beavis and Butthead Do America.
Oh God, there's so many you guys could hear in full if you sign up for the What a Cartoon Movie $10 a month level at patreon.com/TalkingSimpsons, and you get all that $5 stuff Bob mentioned too. It is a cavalcade of savings.
And if you've never been part of Patreon before, it's so easy to sign up, and once you do, you're given access to a code. What you do is you just drop that code into whatever you use to listen to podcasts. It's so easy to download our bonus podcast alongside your regular free podcast. Patreon also has an app that makes it super easy to download our bonus podcast. Either way, it is so easy and simple to be part of the Patreon and to get all of those bonus podcasts you probably haven't heard yet.
So please check all that out. And now let's shift into Hyperdrive and hear the rest of our chat about Yu-Gi-Oh! 5D's. Okay, so we're back for the first episode of Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds. Yeah, this one, it's an interesting first episode that really, I think, sets up, it gives you a good first taste of the world, but it's not like the first episode of Duel Monsters is, it's the first meeting of the rivals, but in this case, they delay the rival battle until episodes 4 and 5 on this show.
Which is a smart decision, I think, because if you just hand the viewers the big rivalry in one episode and then you're done, it's compelling in a way, and it's exciting in that first Yu-Gi-Oh! Series because it's Yugi coming out of nowhere and using magical powers to do this. But this would just sort of be like, well, this is the final act of a story that we've just sort of jumped into, so it wouldn't really mean anything. But one thing I love about the way they introduced the world is that they immediately open with a shot that's like 90% 3D, like computer digital animation. And I don't think they've really used that before in a Yu-Gi-Oh show. So they're really showing off and they're like zooming in between the buildings and it's CGI everywhere. It's kind of funny.
Yeah, the CG used in the show, some of it's aged better than others, but I think in use they all work really well.
Yeah, I was surprised by how it wasn't very distracting. At times it was a little rough, but then I was like, oh, you know what, this works. They managed to figure it out.
And this first episode, the animation director on it is Kenichi Hara. This is his first episode directing with Yu-Gi-Oh! According to the fan wiki, Hara is known for his episodes having better than average animation, and that he's known to direct, major episodes or season finales of Yu-Gi-Oh! Episodes because they could count on him for quality. And he's since 5D's, he's worked on basically every Yu-Gi-Oh! Series in some major role or other. So this a big episode for Kenichi Hara here. Yeah, this first episode and the first 5, they hint at, the mysteries of signers and dragons and all that. But I think the show, really gets out of the gate by episode 6 once Yusei goes to jail and like gets his criminal mark on. Like, it's even weird to look at him in these first 5 episodes with a clean face when his mark is such an integral part of his character.
That's kind of like when Samus loses all her armor and stuff, and you have to go collect all of it again. Putting him in jail grounds him. He can't use his motorcycle. He hasn't got access to any of his equipment. He's being tortured. He's basically subhuman from the way everybody's treating him, and it gives him somewhere to go.
Yeah, you get to see him. You get to see his abilities in these first 5 episodes, and then as they rebuild him from the episodes onward, you already know, like, no, he's one of the best card battlers around. And yeah, the cyberpunk elements are really interesting from the beginning. I think I'm gonna use the 4Kids names for basically everybody when referring to people here, but I prefer calling it Neo Domino City. I think they call it
much cooler.
Yeah, New Domino City. Come on, Neo is so cool.
Neo is
and it's
better.
so Akira. It's like Neo Domino City is about to explode with card games.
They maybe that's why they backed off and were like, boy, just saying it out loud, Neo Domino City, it makes it even more obvious.
Yeah.
And it's really cool. They start the series by showing you Jack Atlas, which, if you're a first-time viewer, you might think like, oh, is this the main character? He's really good at this card game.
I assumed it was immediately.
But let's talk about that accent.
Yes, I was curious, especially what you felt about his Cockney accent they gave Jack Atlas.
Yeah, it is attempting a Cockney there, isn't it? I mean, it's a 4Kids character. Like there's like a character later on in the episode that has like a really heavy like Bostonian accent. It's like they're just pulling from all over the place. And I remember sitting and watching it and making jokes about it. But I've come to terms with Jack's randomly Cockney accent. He's a Cockney crab, basically.
It's very bizarre that like from Star Wars up to now, the shorthand for evil is often British.
Very much so, and it's very true.
That's what made me happy in like the most recent Star Wars films. They still stuck with like, well, the bosses of the Empire are still like proper British people who make commands to Star Destroyers. Yeah, his accent is really wild, especially because like Jack in Japanese is not played with like from what I can hear, it's not like a more extreme accent than Yusei has. So it's a very wild choice, but the kind 4Kids liked. I think in general they wanted to pepper in different American accent or English language accents in there to make it more vocally diverse, I guess, in that way. And instead of everybody talking with the same mid-Atlantic normal American accent we're used to hearing.
Very much so. I think it's as simple as that, really. And ultimately, it's a silly voice on a kind of ridiculous show, and I don't think it ruins anything. I think the character's still very strong, and but yeah, it's just a bit strange to suddenly hear, "Oh, I'm gonna turbo do."
In your 5D's video, your Jack voice is a bit more extreme, I think.
Yeah, that was inspired by a friend called Carolyn who had this interpretation of the character where he would speak in all caps. And I was like, that seems like a really solid take on that character, especially in the Japanese version, because he's such a strong personality, very, very solid. Yeah, he's just this! It's just lots of screaming.
Sorry, I didn't want to hurt your voice by asking you to do that.
Fine. I didn't want to hurt your ears.
But yeah, the opening too, this is one of the first changes 4Kids made from the Japanese broadcast version, which is, I think, good ones. The establishing shot of both Satellite and Neo Domino, those are inserted in there. In the cold open in the Japanese one, you don't see those establishing shots, which I think are much more important for clarity, to especially showing Satellite. It lets you know that like Yusei is in a very different place than where Jack is. Like it's very important. Though talking about Yusei being the strong silent type, right before the credits in Japanese, he says nothing.
That's right.
It's just his determination. It was 4Kids who added the immortal "I'm coming" line. Which,
I'm gonna settle the score.
Yusei in English talks a lot about coming. He's coming to a lot of places.
I mean, he's sitting on a motorcycle all day.
Oh, God.
It's vibrating all the time. Is he really coming for Jack in this situation? Though? I don't know if he's necessarily even doing that in the original Japanese, because he's just sort of going to his hideout or his like underground little secret place.
Yeah, he's practicing.
Yeah, I feel like that maybe they just assumed that he was ultimately going to go for Jack, but I don't know.
And then comes in the opening song, which, the Japanese OP is fun and good, and I think the animation's actually better for it, but I actually prefer the silliness of Hyperdrive.
When listening to it, the English opening song, I assume that they had just, translated an existing J-Rock song, but no, they kind of wrote their own J-Rock style song, and it sounds very authentic. It sounds like this could have been a translated song or a song that they localized, but I like both, but I do like the Japanese one a little bit more.
I can hear you breathing, I can see you coming. It's a good song.
Yeah. Well, you're more experienced with the English language songs for Yu-Gi-Oh! Where would you say this Hyperdrive stands compared to the other ones?
Well, I think Yu-Gi-Oh! GX is always going to be at the top, because that is a jam. But honestly, Hyperdrive, I like it, but it's never really connected with me. I've never really been like, yeah, that is the song of 5Ds. That makes me think of 5Ds. I don't know. It's just a catchy song to me. So I've never really been like, yeah, that is one of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Themes. So honestly, not that high for me. I think it would probably be somewhere in the middle. I definitely prefer it to, like, say, Arc 5 or even like Vrains. But I think the original Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters theme, it just feels like you're going on an adventure into some sort of epic situation, and it's hard to top that. And then GX, just you're chilling out with your crew in the schoolyard, and how can you beat that?
Then after the opening, we cut, which sets up most of the key monsters and all the characters. Like it's a classic anime opening of flashes of characters and silliness, and also like serious looks at things. I don't think there's any seagulls, like no birds flying through the sky shots.
Yeah, no bird metaphor in this one.
But then they cut back to intercutting between Yusei and Jack's different paths at the moment. In general, I like the design of the base of the satellite characters, that they're underground, but there's this crack in the street that lets you peer down into their world. I really like that design.
It is really cool. It's kind of, to me, it's like a new New York a little bit in Futurama.
Yeah,
it makes you wonder what happened. Like, why is this giant crack in the earth?
I do want to point out that the announcer claims that this duel that Jack is having is the rematch of the century. And I'm like, who the hell is he dueling? Who cares about any of this? Hunter Pace is the name of the guy, and he's got this crazy character design. But we never really know anything about why this is the rematch of the century.
And seemingly Jack beats him in a single turn.
Seems like it, yeah.
Which, that's a pretty bad champion to lose in one turn in the rematch.
I think he took a fall for money. I think that's what it was.
Yeah.
I also like that the announcer's like, if you're watching this for the first time, this is what a speed duel is.
See, the fact that
the rematch of the century. In case you've never tuned into boxing in your life, these guys are going to punch each other.
It's so strange that they provide this tiny amount of context, but then absolutely nothing else for the rest of the show. Just well, just don't even include this then, because you're not going to bother with anything else.
Turbo duels are about being fast. That's all. After that explanation, we get to meet Jack Atlas.
Duelists young and old, professional and amateur alike, it's the moment you've been waiting for. So make some noise for the #1 ranked turbo duelist in the world, Jack Atlas! As he looks to add to his unbeaten streak today, one begs the question, can anyone take this man down? What say we kick this turbo duel into overdrive?
Hello, Mary Poppins.
It's from the Dick Van Dyke School of Americans doing British accents. As an American, I appreciate your American accent styling, Martin.
I appreciate it. I put very little effort into doing it, and I think that's how I make it work. I've always, I hate to say it, always kind of considered the American accent to just sort of be lazy talking. So it's one of those things where I'm just like, I'm just gonna not try a little bit and then just sort of see what happens.
We flatten every vowel into a solid sound. So
very much so.
I worked with a number of British people, and when they'd be asked to do an American accent, they'd normally go to like the totally tubular dude. Like
that's weird. Yeah, that's a thing. Like whenever British people talk about like the cliche American accent, it's always like a sort of California Valley girl or the surfer dude. It's weird. I don't know why it's that.
They give you an explanation like the more speed a duelist has. I do think that like the visuals of them going on autopilot and just having like speed lines all around them as they throw out monsters, and I think that's cool. And also you can even see it in just this brief glimpse of Jack Atlas's battle here. You can see how well someone's doing from just their like position in it, like who's in front of the other in this race here.
My question was though, what is the audience seeing?
I'm pretty sure there's an episode or two where you see the screens and you get to see like a split screen of the two riders, I think.
Okay, yeah, it's much easier to see someone like in the first series when they're on a giant podium and in front of a crowd.
But then again, people love watching NASCAR.
That's
and I don't
true.
understand that.
It's mainly about getting drunk. So,
Jack declares himself the king in the Japanese version, but he beats the previous champ in just one move, and he's got a challenge.
Turbo Duelists. Countdown initiated. Ready, set, duel.
You're all mine.
Turbo Duel! Turbo Duel! Turbo Duel!
And Hunter has played a powerful trap. Can Jack Atlas recover?
You've had your fun, but it's time for my victory lap. Now, I'm sure you remember my Red Dragon Archfiend from our last match, Hunter. And since you worked so hard to get back here, you can have the honor of falling to my most powerful beast again. Archfiend, send him back to the junkyard with scorching crimson flare!
I did laugh at victory lap.
Victory lap.
I love the cheerleaders chanting just turbo duel, because that's the equivalent of like cheerleaders at a football game just going football, football.
We love the playing of a sport. I mean, I love anime cheerleaders. That's just always a funny thing to me to see cheerleaders in anime. Believe I had seen that in the original airing of this, folks said that they de-emphasized the chests of the cheerleaders, but I think in at least the version that's on YouTube with English language, it looks pretty much the same to me.
Okay,
they've been known to change the cleavage line of a number of characters in 4Kids Past.
And it always looks terrible.
Mm-hmm.
It's embarrassing. It's like I'd feel less weird looking at the cleavage as is. It's just ugh.
That line is too dirty. That vertical line. Give you ideas.
It's not as bad as say looking when they just draw in a sandwich in somebody's hand instead of a rice ball, but. And then everybody does an Akira bike slide just over and over again. You see like those approximately like 5 times per episode.
That's true.
but it's so cool. I don't blame them.
Everyone rips it off for a reason.
And there's also like one of my favorite drawings in the whole episode is when Jack Atlas in his as his bike is moving, he points to the sky and just calls himself like the master of duels. Like it's just a cool pose. And it's also a really cool like juxtaposition. You see Jack as the king of this glossy racetrack, and then you see like Yusei in like basically the sewers pushing around a broken bicycle or motorbike.
Right. Yeah, definitely visual contrast there.
Yeah, I think the next shot after this this tournament or this match or whatever is just an establishing shot of the satellite city and how ruined and ugly the colors are, and just a very bad place to be.
And his friends are watching seemingly a pirated viewing of the turbo duel, and Yusei shuts him down.
What? What'd I say, Blitz?
You don't want to hear about how amazing Jack Atlas was.
Oh, sorry.
Only one person should be sorry. Right. Jack still owes you for what he did. Got that right.
So where you been, Yus?
The tunnels, testing a new acceleration chip.
So are you gonna tell us if the new chip worked out or what?
Duh, Tank. Does it look like it worked?
I guess not. Although, hey, your other runner looked great on TV.
Tank!
Just trying to make our friend feel better is all. That is, Yusei's stool runner. I mean, if it weren't for Jack double-crossing Yus and stealing his ride, Yus would have been given that interview. Because Jack got all famous with Yus's runner, all the fame, fortune, and glory of Jack's now.
Tank!
What?
I like how they make this this needless exposition character just very stupid with no social skills. So he's just reminding people of things that they don't need to be reminded of for no
He says
reason.
this stuff 5 times a day.
Yeah. When he goes into more exposition, I'm just like, wow, they're really going for this.
Yeah.
That's like saying to somebody who've like had all their money robbed from them. They're like, well, as we all remember, you got robbed that day.
And you were really sad, too.
It sucked. I'm glad they put it in the mouth of a stupid guy like Tank.
Good old Tank. He can't say duh before he speaks, but he should.
You're right. He is basically Moose. Like, duh, why? I don't know why. But I like as they're watching Jack like on TV challenge somebody, Yusei just shuts him up by revving his engine. He's like, vroom. They're like, oh shit, Yusei's here. Hey, we're sorry, we were watching your old friend win this. And his satellite friends, apparently they kind of fall into the background as the 5D's series goes on.
Yeah, they're not one of the 5Ds. They don't get to play.
And the through the oaf character, we learn a lot. Like Jack still owes Yusei for quote unquote what he did, and that Yusei's bike was stolen too, and Jack has it now, and he's using that to win. So like we get a lot about what their connection is.
I like the interviewer says too, like, well, you probably just win because your bike's good. He's like, no, it's my cards. I'd be good on any bike. Fuck you. And then meanwhile, Yusei is having to like scrounge to put together another good bike. He already in Satellite built an awesome bike out of scrap, and now he's having to do it a second time while Jack is succeeding off of all of his stuff. A good place to start with your underdog character, I think.
Definitely.
And then in comes Rally, the very like archetypal innocent street urchin I wrote. She's almost like out of a Dickensian novel of some kind.
It's the anime Dickensian novel, certainly.
She needs a more like a smudged face.
Well, she does have a criminal mark on her.
That's true. That counts.
That's right.
It tells you like, boy, this is a harsh society that they will tattoo the face of like a little Moffat. And just for probably stealing a loaf of bread or something. But
just to clarify, I think Rally is a boy.
Oh man,
I wasn't sure. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. I misread.
There was a lot of discussion about that initially when the Japanese came out, but I do think that he's a boy.
Okay. Thank you.
I checked the wiki. Yeah, he's a boy.
Okay. Good. All right. I will keep getting that right now. But Rally. I mean, Rally is a fun little sidekick. At least the innocent that your main character gets to save in this important character building episode.
The one that picked up an acceleration chip that was just lying there on the floor, which is easily the most gullible character in Yu-Gi-Oh! So far, I think.
It wasn't attached to a string that someone was leading him around.
No, and I love in this clip how they react to Rally of just like, come on, nobody just leaves a chip on the ground. And this is also a good little clip to explain the sad existence of being a satellite resident.
This is just what I needed.
You can't use that use.
You gotta make Rally take it back.
I knew you'd like it. I knew it. Will it make you faster?
Absolutely.
Well, then maybe he shouldn't return it.
Tank!
What? We know how you feel, Use, but I think it's time to bury the past, move on, and forget about Jack Atlas.
But Jack also took Yusei's best card, remember, Nervin?
And you remember, Jack's in the city, and the people over there don't take too kindly to those of us from the satellite.
Yeah, and in case you forgot, sometimes you gotta stand up for yourself.
You say, us satellites should just stay put.
Jack didn't stay, so why should I? Let him go, bro. Don't risk your freedom for some wheels and a car. I think Nerve's right. It's time to put the past in the past.
Everybody's telling him, like, just be a serf. Just, who cares? I like that only the innocent child is just like, sometimes you got to stand up for yourself.
And lots of basic facts about the world are discussed. Like, well, maybe you forgot this.
As you know, our entire class of people is kept on this island and can't leave.
There's a weird moment when I think Nervin is his name. He's talking to Rally, and when he's talking about them getting tracked down and marked, which is obviously hinting at the detention center stuff, he starts stroking Rally's face.
It is a little odd, yeah. It's a very specific move.
It's definitely like, I think, him suggesting he's pointing at the marking on Rally's face as he's doing it, but it's weird if you don't know what that is to see a grown man just kneel down next to this child and start twirling his finger on the side of his face.
It is odd, yeah. Especially for the effete nerd character to be the one doing it too.
Yeah.
But it's supposed to just be them saying, "Hey, he doesn't want to have a criminal mark like you," which they use to track everybody. But I do think it's it's only clear after 5 episodes later you see a criminal mark applied to Yusei. And also that, this really sets up his friend characters, that you have the plucky little kid, the nerd, the timid nerd, the stupid fat guy, and then just
his name is Tank.
And then his regular, just his plain friend who his face is really Tristan-y, I think, too.
Very Tristan-y.
I mean, hey, I think not unlike how the Akira Toriyama art style only really has 4 faces, I think the Yu-Gi-Oh art style too is a little limited in how many face types there are.
That's why they double down on hair.
Mm-hmm.
Hair is very distinct on all the characters.
And but yes, Yusei then he decides he's going to use that chip, even though he's not a dullard. He knows it's a trap too, but he's like, I'll just use this chip. And it flagrantly, in the face of everything I know about vehicles and thermodynamics, placing a chip in a bike makes an engine be faster.
It told the bike to be faster.
Yeah, simple.
That's how Cybertruck works.
If bike equals slow, then go to 10. 10 equals fast bike. There you go.
But I mean, it's a funny idea that a computer chip can tell your bike to be faster. That's pretty great.
I like the sound that it makes after he puts it in. It sounds kind of like Darth Vader ripping a huge fart in the corridors of the Death Star.
It's a very satisfying animation to see him pop the chip in. It's like sticking in an SD card or something. It's just very satisfying to watch.
Yeah.
And the very specific motion of how he keeps them between his fingers in his left hand. I like that too. You say he's kind of got an answer for everything, even when the cops show up and it's revealed that they were tracking Rally. You say keeps his cool because he's a cool, righteous cyberpunk lead character. I like that about him.
He just starts hacking because he knows that's how he's going to deal with this.
Mm-hmm. And it also to separate him from previous Yu-Gi-Oh protagonists and most anime protagonists, he's on the run from cops from day one. He's like, fuck the police. That's his stance right from the begining.
It is very cool to see a character like that in charge in a Yu-Gi-Oh show, sort of being the leader character where because, Jaden was a bit of a punk, but he wasn't a criminal.
These guys are like born criminals. They're like, I mean, that's just society, man. That put him in there. And yeah, this kid's. It's also funny that it's so like trying to tear down a society that has haves and have-nots in this, commercial for $1 billion card game. It's pretty funny in that regard.
Very much so. And it's interesting that there is a line later, and I don't mean to get ahead of us, but they talk about how people in Satellite aren't allowed to have cards.
Yeah.
And it's like, I guess that's there to make it seem like a much bigger deal when they get a card, because, this precious item that, you shouldn't have. But it also kind of, I don't know, makes it seem like, I don't know, if you're of a lower caste, you shouldn't be playing Yu-Gi-Oh!
Yeah, it's too important.
Maybe that's how they're like, well, how do we express to kids a dystopian world?
Imagine.
You can't have your card.
Oh, your toys are taken away on a massive scale.
Remember when your teacher took away your Yu-Gi-Oh cards? Well, this is society taking them away.
But yeah, the cops show up and, they can either just give up or run from the cops, and Yusei decides to run.
We have you surrounded, 86007.
Look what you did!
I didn't do nothing! Litz, I promise I didn't steal anything! It's like I said before, it was just lying there and nobody was around!
None of that matters, Rally. It's gonna be all right. So what should we do?
There's nothing we can do. That mark is like a homing device. It sends a signal to security.
I got that covered. The signal! It's been compromised! I bought you guys a couple of minutes. Where do you think you're going? You take the east tunnel. I'm gonna take this chip out for a test drive. You heard the man. Let's bolt.
And the cop that's following them is Tetsu Trudge, or Tetsu Ushio, I believe his Japanese name is.
I mean, it's clear that there's an existing relationship between them, but I don't think he's named in this episode. Or at least I must have missed it because I just kept writing the cop.
He's named in the credits, but I don't think they say his name out loud, no.
There are no credits on the YouTube version. We were talking about this before the recording. It's very strange. Just like on to the next one as soon as the first one ends.
Yeah.
That is weird.
Trudge was in Duel Monsters, wasn't he?
Yes, he shows up in a very important scene. Well, he's in the original manga as well. He plays a very important role because he's the bully that sort of threatens Yugi. He's like, you got to give me 20,000 yen or I'm going to ruin your life. So Yugi he panics and he obviously doesn't get the money, but then Ushio ends up beating up Joey and Tristan. And I can't remember if he does it to impress Yugi or if he just does it because he felt like it. But ultimately that leads to Yugi also getting beaten up and Joey and Tristan learning to respect Yugi as a person because he didn't just run away or back down. He was willing to stand beside them and take his licks, essentially. So that's a very formative moment for their relationship, and Ushio was there to punch it into being.
Well, so that makes Trudge a very important early character, both in Duel Monsters and in this. And it's funny that even in the dystopian future, he's still this bully still became a dirty cop, which is a funny. And I read ahead on the wiki, Trudge actually goes through a bit of a character arc in the series and learns to reject his prejudices on the satellite folks and learns that we're not so different and teams up with a kid. Most Yu-Gi-Oh villains do turn into a friend eventually.
He's a very career-minded cop, just like Lucky Piquel from Bonkers.
The classic Bonkers character. Sorry if we're losing you with the Bonkers talk, Martin.
I've seen one episode, but I'm racking my brains.
You're good. You're good.
It's fine. Yes, Trudge is leading the chase after Yusei, and when they come to a stop, they both do the Akira slide, another double
You're
Akira
right.
slide.
This is Akira Slide, the series.
I mean, that's cool. I prefer that to them taking 7 seconds of animation to slow down their bike and carefully put it into place.
Put on the kickstand, yeah.
But yes, Yusei, then meets up with Trudge, and this is where there is the biggest change from the subtitle version to the dub version.
Okay.
Because in the subtitle version, Ushio and Yusei have no previous relationship. They have never met. As far as the dialogue, at least, is concerned, they have never met each other before. And so any dialogue from that point onward, where they say, like, just like back at the re-education center, you did this, never talked about, not once in there.
So I was going to say, yeah, I didn't remember any of this dialogue from the Japanese version. So yeah, that makes sense.
Are they making this up or hinting at things they'll talk about later in the show?
I think it's more making it up to make this work more. I don't.
Instead of just being some random cop he fights, it's somebody who there's like higher stakes. There's higher emotional stakes.
And I think the dub adds, I think it's an improvement to give more emotional stakes to this battle than just being some random jerk cop.
Definitely. And with the way he talks about it, he's linking Yusei to Rally more, which makes it clearer as to why Yusei would make the decision to sacrifice himself as in a way.
Yeah, it makes Rally's relationship matters more. It sets up Trudge's background, and also, like, in the subtitle version, Trudge will many times still be like, oh, use garbage from Satellite using garbage. I hate all you people. Like, he still says that, but he can't get personal with Yusei. He's just like, oh, Yusei, you're a dumb kid. That's basically it.
So the deal that he does here is he wants to duel the cop, and the stakes are to like sweeten the deal for the cop. He's like, if you win, you catch me, and that's a much bigger deal than getting that like little urchin because you'll get promoted if you catch me.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of implying that Yusei has been eluding them is like this golden egg of sorts that, you know, if they get him, then you'll have whatever you want. But it also kind of sounds like the way the dub presents it that he's already been taken in, he's already had been arrested, but for some reason didn't experience a lot of the stuff that Rally did, I guess.
Yeah, he should have a full criminal record and a mark by this point, but it is a little unclear. The timeline is hard to piece together in the dub version of it. But here, why don't we hear the full challenge to a duel?
Are you going to make this easy and come along quietly?
I will. If you can beat me.
I see you still think you can outduel sector security. It's too bad the rules say you satellites can't carry cards.
Rules were made to be broken, weren't they? Now if I win this duel, Rally and me are free to go. No questions asked, Trudge.
The law does not negotiate with...
And what's in it for me should I accept your proposal?
But Article 4B clearly states
Well, allow me to clearly state this. Get moving or else.
This is highly improper!
I said move. Or would you prefer to be working on trash detail?
Back to Command Central, everyone. Direct orders.
Well, should you accept and win, you'll tell Sector Security to call off their hunt for Rally.
And how does that benefit me?
Because I'm gonna say it was me who stole the chip, and that I tried to flee the scene but couldn't outrun your pursuit. A statement like that'll probably bump you up to Sergeant. So what do you say, officer?
You've got yourself a deal. Fool.
That's, yes, a lot of added bits there in the dub. Another bit is that in the subtitle version, Yusei, when he's told, well, you can't have cards, Yusei presents his cards and just goes like, I have cards. Like, it's a more flat expression of definitely still going against the rules, but he's not in his face like Yusei is in English of like, rules were made to be broken, I've got cards.
Yeah, he sounds more like terse in the Japanese version, less of a cool action hero and more of just like a silent but deadly kind of guy.
Yeah, he's sort of like a Kazuma Kiryu type.
Oh, yeah.
He says as little as possible, but he says as much as he can with that.
Both Kiryu and from the Yakuza series and Yusei, they both go back to this like classic storytelling archetype you see in a lot of Japanese comics and anime, which is like this silent troublemaker, though, who is more causes trouble by like their noble beliefs, not by like being a jerk who causes trouble intentionally.
Yeah, I've always loved that about Kiryu because he's the kind of guy who will always do the right thing, but it will always bite him in the ass.
And characters will tell him to his face, like, you really shouldn't do that. Like, just why? Wouldn't it be nice if in real life, like, if motorcycle gangs were challenging cops just to card games as a way to ease tension?
That'd be cute.
But so another big change from the dub is the other cop who tells him, like, hey, the rules say this. In the subtitle version, it's just him saying, like, I don't know about this. And the way the trudge stops it, he goes, like, what, do you think I could lose? And then the cop's like, all right, just challenge him, and they leave. It's not, it feels more like an American cop film of saying,
definitely.
like, this is highly against the rules, sir.
This guy is a loose cannon, I would say, this cop.
I do like that somebody in a Yu-Gi-Oh show cares about the rules, though.
Well, the next 7 to 8 minutes is all rules. And Henry is producer on this. I don't know how you wanted to handle this, but it's just like a series of, now I'm doing this, and this means this, and I'm recycling my cards. I'm going to play this now, just like back and forth. And it's, I mean, the animation is cool, but not enough context for me, the newcomer to this card game.
No, I'm not going to play too many clips from the explanation of moves because it's easy to just, for a non-player of the card game, I get lost in the descriptions a lot of the time.
I wrote down every move they made just to like see if I could figure it out myself. I mean, it's not super complicated, but still there's a few, like they need to define certain terms and a few things like that for the newcomer, I think. But this show is not made for a newcomer.
And credit, a big tip of the hat to the people who do the fan wiki of this, because on the page for this episode, it goes turn by turn, like numbered, like in turn one, Trudge did this, and then Yusei did this. Like it's that is very helpful for keeping it straight too, and knowing what moves were done.
Something that made me laugh while watching this was I wish they would cut away from Speed World to see what's happening in the real world as they're racing, and just to see like dead pedestrians in the street and all this chaos they're wreaking by not paying attention to the road.
If it didn't happen in Speed World, it didn't happen.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's also a helpful thing that the computer just says autopilot initiated, or activated, because that does explain why they don't even care about steering or anything as they're playing this card game.
It's also a good way to save on animation in that when you're entering the cyber world, it's easier to draw like more abstracted backgrounds than as if they were riding through a real city or a highway. You have to make more, intelligible things to your eye. Here you can just make, here's a blue shape, here's a purple shape.
I do like how the Speed World kind of looks like one of those holographic sticker albums that I used to have as a young kid. Like, it just looks like, what if the world was one of those?
And I was also thinking of Tron while watching this.
Very Tron.
Yeah,
for sure.
They didn't leave those trails behind them, though.
No, but there's some bits where it even feels like they're just on like the grid style backgrounds instead of the regular backgrounds they'd have in the world. And I do like how the characters use cards that match who they are, like that Trudge has assault dog and handcuff
dragon. Handcuff dragon.
Handcuff
please.
Dragon is one of my faves.
Though according to the wiki, though, when Yusei uses a summon Speed Warrior, which that fits for his character too, Speed Warrior, he's like, I use a speed counter. Apparently you don't need to use a speed counter to summon Speed Warrior, and how he does there.
I had my eyes on that Sonic Chicken. Like, he's going to come back. The Sonic Chicken did not do anything in this fight.
I love that Sonic Chicken.
He's kind of the Kuriboh of Yusei's deck, I think.
Which is where your name comes from, in case folks think you're like a Super Mario fan who loves Kuriboh.
I do get that sometimes. I do get that. But yes, I'm named after the mascot, little tiny cute mascot character from Yugi's deck in the original.
And as the fight begins to, I think they are trying to think of new viewers, and just how Trudge says, like, you never were good at math. 2,000 is bigger than 1,400. That you at least have to explain to a complete neophyte of that Yu-Gi-Oh is a game of math, ultimately.
Yeah, and they sort of explain like, a trap card can stop someone from making a move, or like cancel out a move or something like that. Like, it was enough for me. I just wanted like, okay, what does it mean when you do this, or can you explain more about why you're doing this? But this is not for the 37-year-old newcomer to Yu-Gi-Oh.
Yeah, I mean, I was watching it and I was paying attention to the duel, and for the most part, it's fairly easy to understand if you've indoctrinated acclimated yourself into the rules of the card game. But there are certain things that sort of jumped out at me where I was like, oh, that's a little bit different than I'm used to. Like, instead of saying let's duel, they say let's ride. And I'm like, that's interesting. And then there's one trap card that Trudge uses. He doesn't even explain what it does, called Wiretap Trap Card. And they don't even explain how it helps him, but it does. And I'm still at a loss.
Well, also, though, Trudge doesn't seem to understand the rules sometimes, because when you say, like, pulls out Scrap Iron Scarecrow, he's like, wait, that prevented me from attacking you. It's like that. I think that's a core dynamic.
It's not like a dirty trick.
Right.
Though I also do like that Trudge, most of his taunts at Yusei are about calling him poor and being like, you couldn't even get good cards. Like, I think it speaks to the, the real life thing that some players probably experience of, well, I couldn't buy that card on eBay, or I couldn't, as I'm a little kid, I can't buy every awesome card and put that in my deck.
I think that's kind of why Kaiba works so well as not necessarily an antagonist, at least not until you get to a certain point in the show. But Kaiba is obviously the elite. He's rich. He can have any card he wants. And he's great at the game, and he flaunts it. So it's cool to see something. It's a very different way of presenting it, but to show that sort of dynamic where it's like he looks down on Yusei, even though these guys have probably never played a card game before, as far as I know. But he still looks down on them because of his place in society.
Yeah, and I mean, Atlas kind of has that as well in the way Seto Kaiba does, of just like, I have everything and I'm also very skilled. Like having the skills to back up being a rich jerk, like that's the ultimate nemesis.
Oh yeah, it grinds your gears. You get really upset about it.
And though Trudge too, like he's constantly like crapping on him, saying like just like a satellite to hide behind junk. Like, and also though I think it is them telling viewers, it's more clear in the sub at the end of the episode, but I think they want to tell viewers like there aren't good and bad cards. Cards you think aren't useful can be used to win a game, and that's what they're doing through Yusei, that he's got all these lesser cards and none of the most expensive ones, but he still can win.
Yeah, I thought that was like a general metaphor for the satellite people, or analogy where it's like, don't underestimate it just because we're weaker or something like that. It's like we have a hidden power.
Yeah, just because my deck is cobbled together, much like my bike, I put something together that is stronger than the sum of its parts.
But Yusei does a very risky move here that gets him down to 100 health before he makes his move in this one. And by the way, the eye catches in this are very boring. I think they could add more fun ones.
Just the logo, right?
Just the logo on black, yeah. But Yusei is in trouble when the Montage Dragon appears.
Montage Dragon's attack points are equal to the total level of the monsters sent to the graveyard, multiplied by 300.
Quite the beast.
Wait till you see it in action. But first, my handcuffed dragon is taking out your Sonic chick. And with him out of the picture, I'm just one attack from putting you away for good. Go, Power Collage!
You may have knocked me down, but it'll take more than that to knock me out.
There's not a card in your deck that can save you now.
He's right, but I've never relied on just one card before, and I don't plan on starting now.
Again, Trudge does not understand that cards can be improved with other cards or augmented with them. It's a very key part of it. That then leads to the show's first ever Synchro Summon, which is the very specific new mechanic for this show. And that includes bringing out the tuner card, which I really love the design of that of the synchro of the tuner card. What is his name?
He's a real.
Yes,
he's a real goofbot.
Yeah. I love that he's like a dorky gearhead who's also just like a walking engine.
And he's bright bright orange.
Yes, yeah.
But when you combine him with Speed Warrior, slightly less goofy.
Yeah, that I like that. That's his, like, obviously Stardust Dragon is Yusei's like best card, but before he gets that back, like Junk Warrior is a cool team to have for him, and especially like it fits. He is a Junk Warrior. It fits for who Yusei is.
Very true, very true.
And I also like that Yusei, when he summons Junk Warrior here in this next clip, he even brings up like recycling, which that is basically the indentured servitude of the people of Satellite, is to recycle everything for the people of Neo Domino so they can live in peace and happiness. But let's hear the very involved synchro summoning of Junk Warrior.
It's go time. I summon out the Junk Synchron Tuner Monster.
Junk Synchron is a level 3 tuner monster. Tuner monsters combine with other monsters to form more powerful synchro monsters.
You have a tuner monster? That can't be.
And yet somehow it is. Next up, I activate the Graceful Revival Trap card. And it allows me to do what us satellites do best. Recycle my Speed Warrior from my graveyard. Now I tune my Junk Synchron with my Speed Warrior to Synchro Summon Junk Warrior!
And as Junk Warrior appears, this very brief clip is Yusei for the first time saying his catchphrase. His catchphrase other than "I'm coming."
Oh, okay.
Let's rev it up!
There we go.
Let's rev it up. Well, one thing I didn't get about the, this is like very granular. One thing I didn't get is like, so the Junk Warrior kills the handcuffs dragon, but then it immediately comes back to life like as a ghost. And
they didn't explain that. It's weird.
That really baffled me. I'm just like, well, what is that? Like, what does that mean? Normally they'd be like, well, then it can come back because I did this earlier. Like, normally there'd be a line like that, but that just kind of confused me. But ultimately, it doesn't matter that much. I wrote that down as something like, what? I don't understand.
Yeah. You're right to be confused because, like, considering Trudge is reacting to things like trap cards being activated, the fact that nobody is like, oh, the ghost of a monster that just dyed his hair and it's attacking me. Like, you'd think somebody would have a reaction.
Yeah, like it died seconds ago and now it's back.
Yeah.
Like I rewound a few times. I'm like, no, it killed that monster. I don't know why it came back.
Well, this is a sub and dub difference here. So
let's hear it.
In the sub, since Trudge is not constantly explaining their old background together, he actually is saying a lot more of the rules of cards. In this specific case, he says, so Junk Warrior attacks Handcuffed Dragon, kills it. And he says, oh, you attacked my Handcuffs Dragon because by attacking it, you'll do more damage to me on top of killing it. But you didn't know that one of the abilities of Handcuffed Dragon is if it is killed, it then handcuffs its ghost, handcuffs and halves the damage of its enemy.
That would have been nice to know. Would have been nice to know that.
Well, instead you get Trudge saying like, I'm going to put, it's just like how I scared you in Rally back in the old days.
With a handcuffed dragon ghost.
I mean, I do like that they sub in lines of Yusei saying like, this will make sure Rally and I stay free. But in the original Japanese, I think they are much more explaining the rules instead of just Trudge going like, what? You can't do that.
Yeah, they're going more for the character dynamic in the dub than the just making sure the audience knows what's going on.
Though I wonder too if at a certain point they choose to not explain the rules so much because they worry it can be too boring, or is there something of like if they explain the rules too much then it's very much a commercial and it becomes less legal in some way on American broadcasts. I wonder.
Oh, that is interesting.
Yeah, I really don't know what the line is anymore for that sort of a thing.
You know, my feel is like it's a fuzzier line that they don't want to test, maybe.
Considering the way they go back to doing a lot of the explaining the rules in later series and even episodes of 5Ds. I don't know if it's necessarily that they're worried about that. I think it might be just a director decision, like for the dub. Maybe they just made the call to be like, look, we've had 2 shows where they've been explaining rules half the time. Let's take it easy on the actors and let's take it easy on the audience and just go for something more streamlined and more emotional based rather than instructional.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think from a storytelling standpoint, I think they made a better decision to just have Trudge constantly bring up his background with Yusei during the fight. And I had to laugh reading the wiki version of this fight explained in turns and then experiencing it in the show again, because this is all one turn. The creation of Junk Warrior to then make that attack is one turn that takes place over 5 minutes of footage. and it made me think, if Trudge would just shut up and not explain each thing that happens during a move, I pull this card, well, that card couldn't do anything, but then I play this card, well, that couldn't do anything either. If he just shut up and let him say, I play this, then I do this, then I flip this card, that augments that, it reverses your handcuff card onto you, and now I get to do full damage and you're dead. The end. It would be over in a second.
Watching this gave me respect for the writer of shows like these, because they basically have to first write a simulated card game. Look at all the cards, figure out an interesting way they could all work together, interesting gimmicks or tricks that would not violate rules, and then write a story around that. So I find that's an interesting skill to have, to first write a fake list of turns in a game and then write a narrative around that after you're done.
It's kind of fascinating, and it's one of the reasons that a lot of fans were kind of upset about the way Dark Side of Dimensions, the new movie, presented the game, because a lot of fans appreciated that the older episodes, they wrote these really intricate and very complex and sometimes very long 6-episode duels that had to be consistent and often, unfortunately, weren't, but had to at least tell a story and reflect something on the character dynamics and the struggle that each character has with each other. And in the new movie, they throw a lot of that out. They just say these characters can summon whatever they want at whatever time. It doesn't matter what's in their deck. They can just bring it out. And it did affect a lot of the way that the duels were presented and how they reflected on the story. But I do think that it allowed the writers to tell a more interesting story, because characters weren't having to set up moves 5 turns in advance. They could actually just talk and do the move that's really cool. And it just, because it's a movie, it just feels more special anyway.
Yeah.
What you just said there, Bob, really gave me new appreciation for the writer, or the scenario designer, because I think of how, when you're making up just hand-to-hand combat, everybody knows how a punch or a kick works, and so you can say, I moved faster than you, or I'm stronger than you, or whatever. Or in My Hero Academia, a series I love, when they do a fight, they can just say well, this is my superpower and that's your superpower, and we're just making this up for this specific one-on-one thing. But especially coming in here with all the rules of what the cards do, you can make up new cards, but you still have to follow basically the rules of Duel Monsters to express this combat.
You can't pull an Air Bud rule out of your pocket in a show.
They did that in season 1 of the original, I think.
I think they got shamed so much about that in the first season of Duel Monsters that they've been running from that ever since.
Very much so.
And so, yes, Yusei makes his big move, and I really love his little speech here about his upbringing.
Looks like after all that, you still underestimated the power of my beast.
And you underestimated the power of my deck. Go, Vision Wind!
My Vision Wind? You won that from me on your last day at the Re-Education Center. What are you gonna do with it?
Win this duel. As I'm sure you remember, with it I can special summon 1 level 2 or below monster from my graveyard. And I summoned my Speed Warrior! With it on the field, Junk Warrior special ability activates, making Junk Warrior 900 points stronger.
How could I let a punk kid from the satellite sector get the upper hand? With that power...
My Junk Warrior's gonna make sure me and Rally stay free.
And he identifies in this next bit here where he wins that he's from the streets.
Reminds me of the time you tried to break curfew with Rally. You never thought you'd be caught, but one never does until they are. I can still remember the scared look on Rally's face. And I can't wait to see it again once your friend is rounded up.
Well, keep waiting, because I'm not losing.
Not what?
I activate the trap card, Equip Shot. This releases my warrior from your dragon's grip and lets me use its ability against you.
You can't use my monster against me!
Growing up on the streets, I learned to become very resourceful, using everything to my advantage. And that includes using my opponent's own move against themselves. Junk Warrior, end this!
Like Yusei is reading the back of his own action figure box. Like it's great. Giving like a little bio. Like I've learned how to be resourceful.
I come from the streets. Like, believe it or not, that's not in the sub. He does not have any of that. That whole section there is just him further explaining what the card Equip Shot does and how it allows him to ignore the handcuffed dragon ghost and throw it back onto him.
I love that he used Vision Wind earlier, and then Trudge is like, "You won that from me on your last day in the detention center." But earlier Trudge was like, "You guys can't have cards."
That confused me.
Yes.
That really confused me.
Again, created for the dub, not there in the sub.
Yeah.
So I think when you make additions like that, sometimes you can lose track of the continuity that you're making only for the English language version.
Right. Especially if you've been writing so many Yu-Gi-Oh episodes that it doesn't occur to you that people wouldn't be able to get cards.
Instead, in the sub, he just has general shock of what? No! Like, in a way, Trudge's dialogue is very repetitive in the subtitle version, where he's just constantly incredulous. He has nothing else to
He's
add.
not an important character.
He's just your episode 1 villain that shows how cool your lead is. Yeah, so there's a really cool fight, big punch by Junk Warrior, and he takes them out, and I like that when you lose, his bike stops and he's just blasted in the face with like exhaust or steam or whatever.
It's gotta be a design flaw.
I think that's just an accepted punishment of like, well, if you're gonna ride this motorbike and you lose, you gotta get blasted with steam.
I would like
and it's a police motorcycle.
Yeah, that's true.
I would just remove the punishment steam valve from my motorcycle.
Especially if you're a cop, you would think I would get in the way of your job.
If you accidentally lose a card game while chasing a criminal, that's on you.
Do that on your own time. So Trudge is another very funny change. In the sub, Trudge is just like in general disbelief of like, how did I lose? But they change it in this of just like, I'm going to be a meter maid after this.
Yeah, that's a real like American cop movie or show thing. They're going to bust me down to parking attendant now.
And also in the Yusei has a big speech about why he won and explains it to him. And he's a little more snarky in this. In the Japanese one too, his speech is more generally about like, you shouldn't view other cards as garbage. All cards are awesome. But he doesn't say like, and that's how you should treat people too. In the dub, they make it far more clear of like, don't judge something's worth based on your preconceived notions. But here's his big final speech to Trudge.
There goes my promotion. Guess I'm going back to being a dual runner meter maid.
You mentioned earlier how you wanted to teach me a lesson. Well, how about I leave you with this? Don't underestimate us satellites or our decks, because what you see as weakness is what truly makes us strong. Tell Jack thanks for the chip.
Things ain't over between you and me.
Also, in the sub, there is no indication that Yusei knows that Jack gave him the chip, and this was all a setup from Jack. That is completely created for the dub, which that pays off in like 3 episodes.
But is he still headed to Domino City in the sub?
Yes. So I do have one last clip here. It's a really cool. I just do like the final shot as Yusei just riding around on the abandoned highways that are straight out of Akira, and then looking off in the distance at the like shining glittery city that is he can't go visit. But yes, in the subtitles, his line is translated as "Just wait, Jack." But that's hardly as compelling as this classic line.
Get ready, Domino City. I'm coming.
It's, it's funny. The last words are, I'm
coming.
It's funny.
It should be, here I come. Oh, no.
Either way, you're ending with come or coming.
Yeah.
It got a huge laugh at the live screening I attended at the Comic-Con when they debuted it.
No.
People were chuckling.
Oh, God. I got to think there were some 4Kids executives got yelled at that day for like, why do they laugh? What's these laughs? Here we go. Because it's just supposed to be a cool line of like, get ready. Like, but yes, the statement of "I'm coming" said in that way, especially, for the very online goofers that we all were in the late 2000s, I can see why that would get a gigantic laugh. And then I guess my last thing I'll say about it is big thumbs down to not putting the credits for the dub version up. Like neither on Crunchyroll or the US YouTube are there the credits. I mean, maybe it's something that was lost in like the 4Kids lawsuit or whatever, but lots of people worked hard on this.
Yeah.
Like, and the English language credits credit the Japanese staff and the stateside staff as well, and it's just they deserve credit for their work. It was a bummer to see no credits on there.
I wonder if it was something to do with the song they used. Maybe who knows? It could be anything, or just like I was saying before the recording. Like, what if it was just like, who cares about credits? Let's just like the kids want to go on to the next episode. You want them to get bored for a second.
Yeah, but it was disappointing to see.
No, I agree.
That is a shame. Yeah.
But yeah, this was a really fun first episode. I liked it so much that I checked out the next 4 after it just to experience it, because I love a cyberpunk world. Ever since we did our Akira podcast, I've been enjoying more cyberpunk things as in my media consumption. So this was nice to join it, and I thank Shy Ranger for making us pick this.
Yeah,
one.
thank you. I liked it a lot more than the first series. I'm not above watching a card game play out, because I watched like an 11-episode Kaiji arc of paper scissors rock cards, which was compelling. So I don't know if this is for me, but I did enjoy this episode I watched, and I think I like the added context of like a motorcycle race around explaining the rules of a card game. I think you need to make something interesting happening around a very mundane, like rule-based activity.
I want to say thank you to Shy Ranger for suggesting this, because it not only got me involved, but it got me to sit down and rewatch some Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds, which I just haven't done in, I want to say, a good 5-6 years. So that was really nice to sit down and revisit it. And I'm always going to be grateful for Handcuffed Dragon.
And his ghost.
Yeah. Oh, R.I.P. Handcuffed Dragon. One last shout out I wanted to make too is from watching the later episodes. In episode 4, I think it is, Jack Atlas plays a card I'd never seen before, that I haven't seen most cards before. My husband paused it and was like, wait, have you not seen that card before? And it was, I believe it was called Tactical Espionage.
Yes.
And it's a Solid Snake card. It's
Konami, of course.
It actually got used in this episode by Trudge as well. He used it to summon Montage Dragon.
Which
is perfect, because if anything needs a montage to sum things up, it's Metal Gear Solid.
Oh, yeah.
I forgot. Yes, it's in this episode. He uses it to sacrifice to get Montage Dragon. There's a whole realm of Konami influenced cards in Yu-Gi-Oh! There's multiple ones from the Gradius series, even the Gradius, and even the Easter Island heads. They have their own card.
I like those guys.
And a certain Vampire Hunter has a card too. It's
Blade, right?
Yeah, Blade the Vampire. No, it's really, if you're an old school video game fan who doesn't give a crap about the Yu-Gi-Oh cards, at least look up the funny crossovers that Yu-Gi-Oh did with other Konami series. But I guess, thank you so much, Martin, LittleKuriboh, for coming on our show. We really appreciate that.
Absolutely. This was fantastic. This was a lot of fun. And I hope that the audience got what they wanted out of it. I know I didn't quite lay into the show as I'm known to, but I enjoyed just sort of hanging out and chatting about it. This was really fun.
And please plug all the stuff you're doing now.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. I'm obviously still doing Yu-Gi-Oh! The Abridged series, which you can find at my YouTube channel, which is LittleKuriboh, or I believe you can find it by searching for Card Games FTW. Still doing professional voiceover work. I think the last thing that came out that I did, honestly, the last thing that came out was probably Rise of Skywalker with the audio commentary for the visually impaired. So that's pretty cool. But aside from that, you can find me on Twitter at Yu-Gi-Oh! TAS, and I spend a lot of time on there complaining about wrestling.
Oh man, I saved Bob the pain of hearing me.
There was no wrestling talk on this episode. I totally forgot.
Oh my gosh.
Henry warned me before when I got in, like there could be wrestling talk.
Well, because I'm a big wrestling fan and Bob is not. So whenever we have guests on who know wrestling, I resist the urge to talk about it when not pertinent.
I don't hate wrestling. I just have nothing to add. And I feel like I'm a failure as a podcast host if I can't talk.
It's like seeing somebody summon the ghost of Handcuffed Dragon. You're out of your element. You don't know what's going on.
I need an adult to explain things for me.
Exactly.
Oh, well, and also like us, you're supported on Patreon too. What's the Patreon address?
Yes, you can find me on Patreon at patreon.com/LittleKuriboh. And we've got a bunch of different tiers that you can pledge on there. And it's good stuff.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I'm very grateful to have gotten the chance to talk to both of you and to share my feelings about Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds.
So thanks again to LittleKuriboh. Please check out his amazing videos and his Patreon. And if you want to support our show and get all kinds of bonus stuff on top of that, please head on over to patreon.com/TalkingSimpsons. If you sign up at the $5 level, you'll get all of our episodes 1 week ahead of time and ad-free, and also access to everything behind the $5 paywall. That's all of the exclusive podcasts we've made over the past 2.5 years of this Patreon. That includes too many things to list here, but it also includes all of our mini-series, the most recent of which was Talking Futurama Season 2 Part 1, and there will be 2 mini-series coming up for you in 2020. The first one will be hitting in spring, so you want to stick around for that. And for all the stuff we've done in the past on the Patreon at patreon.com/TalkingSimpsons. Henry, what is happening at the $10 level extra long podcast every month for $10 patrons?
That is correct. If you enjoy the What a Cartoon podcast, you're missing out on the What a Cartoon movie if you're not at the $10 level at patreon.com/TalkingSimpsons. Last week, you may have heard our extended preview of the Animatrix, but you can only hear our 4 hours and 25 minutes of thoughts on that anime anthology, The Amazing World of the Matrix. If you are at the $10 level at patreon.com/TalkingSimpsons, you'll get to hear every month's What a Cartoon movie and the over 50 hours of exclusive podcast content on top of all the other stuff at the $5 level Bob just mentioned.
So yes, again, that is patreon.com/TalkingSimpsons. As for me, I've been one of your hosts, Bob Mackey. Find me on Twitter as Bob Servo. I also do another podcast outside of this about old video games called Retronauts. Find it every Monday wherever you find podcasts, but also you can head on over to patreon.com/Retronauts, and we've got exclusive episodes every other Friday for our patrons over there, so check it out at patreon.com/Retronauts. Henry, how about you?
You can follow me on Twitter at HENEREYG. I tweet out all my thoughts and promotional things about all the cool stuff we do right there. Plus, you should follow the official Twitter account of the Talking Simpsons Network at Talk Simpsons Pod. You'll stay in the loop about all the cool stuff going on in the Patreon and the free feed and all our upcoming stuff. So please follow both of those at HENEREYG and at Talk Simpsons Pod.
Thanks so much for joining us, folks. We'll see you next week for the Hilda episode, The Bird Parade, and we'll see you then.
「その合図叫べ心求めるまま」「窮屈で半端な日常は飛び越えてやる」「ダッシュして輝く未来全部手に入れるさ」「スパークして最高の自分に巡り会えるはずさ」「描いてる希望に向かって走り抜く明日へ」「
Get ready, Domino City. I'm coming.